The morning sun spilled golden rays across the sprawling expanse of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, its terminals buzzing like a beehive under the Georgia sky. James Carter wove through the crowd, his broad shoulders cutting a path with quiet authority. At 40, the billionaire owner of Horizon Air was a man who commanded boardrooms but preferred the shadows today. Dressed in a faded denim jacket and dark jeans, he'd swapped his usual tailored suits for anonymity, booking tickets under his assistant's name to shield his family from prying eyes. Beside him, Elena Carter, 38, moved with a grace that turned heads despite the chaos. Her navy maxi dress flowed with each step, her braided hair swept into a loose bun, a faint smile masking the vigilance in her brown eyes. Their 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, skipped between them, her bumblebee backpack bouncing, stuffed bear buddy clutched tight. A spiral sketchpad dangled from her wrist, already smudged with crayon streaks. The trio headed for Gate C-12, bound for Chicago on Horizon Air Flight 719, a rare escape from James's relentless schedule to attend Elena's charity gala launch. Sophie's giggles cut through the din as she pointed at a luggage cart zipping by. "Look, Daddy, it's like a race car," she chirped, her curls bobbing. James's sharp jaw softened, a grin tugging at his lips. "Fast, huh? Bet it's got nothing on you," he teased, ruffling her hair. Elena glanced at him, her smile teasing but laced with caution. "Think we'll get a quiet trip this time?" she murmured, her voice low enough for Sophie to miss. James shrugged, his dark eyes scanning the crowd. A habit from years of navigating spaces that didn't always welcome him. "Hope so. Long as the coffee's strong, I'm good." His gravelly warmth steadied her, but the weight of curious stares lingered. They reached the gate, where boarding had just begun. The first-class line was short, a mix of suited executives and a woman in oversized sunglasses, clutching a designer purse. James handed their passes to the agent, a young man who nodded without a second glance. But as they stepped toward the jetway, a sharp voice sliced through. "Excuse me." Vanessa Reed, the lead flight attendant, stood rigid, her navy uniform crisp, blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. At 45, her pale green eyes carried a gatekeeper's scrutiny. She extended a manicured hand, badge glinting like a challenge. "I need to see those boarding passes again." James paused, one eyebrow lifting, his calm a wall she couldn't breach. "Sure," he said, handing them over, his tone even. Vanessa's lips pressed thin as she studied the passes, her gaze flicking to Elena's dress, Sophie's backpack, then back to James's jacket, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit her picture of wealth. Vanessa's fingers lingered on the boarding passes, flipping them over as if hunting for a flaw. The names, James Carter, Elena Carter, Sophie Carter, stared back in bold ink. First class, seats 2AC, confirmed. Yet her jaw tightened, a flicker of disbelief souring her forced smile. "First class," she said aloud, the words tasting bitter, her pale green eyes narrowing at James. He nodded unruffled. "That's right. Our seats." His deep voice held steady, a quiet anchor in the rising tension. Elena shifted beside him, her hand tightening around Sophie's, her maxi dress rustling softly. She caught the glint of irritation in James's eyes, a spark she knew from years of facing doors slammed shut by snap judgments. Sophie, oblivious, tugged at Elena's sleeve. "Mommy, can I draw the plane?" she whispered, waving her sketchpad. Elena forced a smile, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Soon, baby," she said, her voice a shield against the unease creeping in. The jetway hummed with boarding passengers, their glances sharp and fleeting. A silver-haired man in a pinstripe suit, Charles Wentworth, a real estate mogul James recognized from Forbes, paused to stare, his Rolex catching the light. "Interesting," he muttered to his companion, loud enough to sting. Across the line, the woman in sunglasses lowered her shades, her crimson nails tapping her purse as she sized up the Carters. Vanessa cleared her throat, her posture stiffening like a soldier before battle. "There's a verification issue," she announced, her tone clipped, handing the passes back with a flick of disdain. "I'll need to check with the gate agent. Stay here." Without waiting for a reply, she spun on her heel, her bun not budging, and marched off, leaving a wake of silence. A junior attendant, Tina Brooks lingered nearby, her round face uneasy. She clutched a tray of boarding stubs, her brown eyes darting to Sophie's bumblebee backpack, then away, as if wrestling with a secret. Elena leaned toward James, her voice a soft hiss. "She's got a problem, doesn't she?" James exhaled, his broad shoulders squaring. "Same old playbook," he murmured, resting a hand on Sophie's shoulder to keep her calm. "She'll learn." But his gaze followed Vanessa's retreat, calculating. The jetway's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the crowd's murmurs growing bolder. Tina stepped closer, hesitating, then offered Sophie a shy smile. "Cool bear," she said softly, nodding at Buddy. Sophie beamed, clutching the toy tighter, unaware of the storm brewing. James caught Tina's glance, an apology unspoken, and sensed an ally, however faint. Vanessa's absence stretched, a countdown ticking in the air, her challenge a spark ready to ignite. The Carters stood firm, a family stealing a moment of normalcy, but the weight of her scrutiny promised turbulence ahead. The first-class cabin of Horizon Air Flight 719 gleamed like a polished jewel, its plush, leather seats and muted gold accents a stark contrast to the brewing tension within. James Carter settled into seat 2A, his denim jacket draped over the armrest, his broad frame filling the space with quiet authority. Elena eased Sophie into the window seat, tucking the bumblebee backpack under her feet, Buddy the bear propped against the armrest. Sophie pressed her nose to the glass, her curls bouncing as she giggled at the tarmac crew below. "They're like ants, Mommy," she chirped, oblivious to the weight settling over her parents. Elena smoothed her navy maxi dress, her brown eyes scanning the cabin before meeting James's. "Here we go," she murmured, a mix of resignation and defiance in her tone. James nodded, his jaw tight but his voice steady. "Just another flight," he said, though his dark eyes betrayed a flicker of wariness. The cabin hummed with privilege. Charles Wentworth sipped bourbon 2 rows ahead, his Rolex glinting, while the woman in sunglasses flipped through Vogue, her crimson nails a sharp slash against the pages. Other passengers offered polite nods or blank stares, their wealth a silent language James knew but rarely spoke. He hoisted their single carry-on, a worn navy duffel, into the overhead bin, his movements smooth, practiced. Elena adjusted Sophie's sketch pad, handing her a green crayon. "Draw me something happy," she whispered, her smile a shield for her daughter's sake. But the calm shattered as Vanessa Reed strode into view, her navy uniform slicing through the cabin's hush like a blade. Her blonde bun sat rigid, her pale green eyes locking onto the Carters with a predator's focus. She stopped beside their row, her heels clicking a warning, and cleared her throat with theatrical precision. "Excuse me," Vanessa said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. James looked up, his expression neutral, one eyebrow arching slightly. "Yes," he replied, his deep tone unshaken. Vanessa's lips twitched into a brittle smile, her gaze flicking over his jacket, Elena's dress, Sophie's backpack. Each detail a strike against her mental checklist of who belonged here. "There's an issue with your seats," she announced, her words dripping with authority, though her eyes betrayed a glint of contempt. "System glitch. They're double booked." Elena's fingers tightened around Sophie's hand, her breath catching. James leaned forward, his calm unshaken. "That's strange," he said, his voice low but firm. "Tickets were confirmed weeks ago, paid in full." Vanessa's smile faltered, her knuckles whitening as she clutched her clipboard, the lie beneath her words starting to crack. Vanessa Reed's clipboard trembled slightly, her pale green eyes darting back to the Carters as if searching for a crack in their resolve. "Rules are rules," she snapped, cutting James off before he could press further. "You'll need to move to economy until we sort this out." Her tone carried a finality that dared defiance, but James didn't flinch. His broad shoulders squared, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a steadiness that made her blink. "Can we speak to your supervisor?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. Elena leaned forward, her navy maxi dress rustling, her brown eyes narrowing to slits. "If this is such a common glitch, where's the manager?" she demanded, her words slicing through the cabin's hum. Sophie paused her doodling, a half-drawn plane in green crayon, and glanced up, her small brow furrowing. "Are we in trouble, Daddy?" she whispered, clutching Buddy tighter. James rested a hand on her shoulder, his touch a quiet anchor. "No, sweetheart. Just a mix-up," he said, though his jaw tightened. Vanessa's smirk crept out, a venomous twist of her lips as she planted her hands on her hips. "I am the supervisor here," she said, her voice dripping with smug authority. "Move. Now." The cabin stirred. Charles Wentworth lowered his glass, eyebrows raised, while the woman in sunglasses snapped a photo, her phone flashing briefly. Whispers rippled, a soft wave of judgment. Vanessa snapped her fingers, sharp as a gunshot, summoning two male attendants. Mike, a burly man with a buzz cut, and Derek, wiry with a patchy beard, loomed behind her, their presence a silent threat. Mike cracked his knuckles, the pop echoing, while Derek shifted, his eyes uneasy but obedient. Sophie whimpered, shrinking into her seat, her sketchpad sliding to the floor. Elena pulled her close, her arm a shield, but her glare could have burned through steel. "This necessary?" James asked, nodding at the attendants, his tone low, dangerous. Vanessa folded her arms, her badge glinting like a medal. "Just ensuring compliance," she said icily. "Let's not make a scene." James weighed his options, his mind a chessboard. Push back, risk escalation, or de-escalate for Sophie's sake. He rose slowly, his 6'3" frame towering over Vanessa, and gestured to his family. "Fine," he said, his voice a quiet thunder. "We'll move, but this isn't over." Elena scooped up Sophie, cradling her against her chest, and grabbed the backpack with a swift yank. James slung the duffel over his shoulder, his steps measured as they walked toward economy, heads high despite the sting. Vanessa's chest puffed with victory, oblivious to Tina Brooks lingering near the galley, her young face pale with guilt. Tina clutched her tray, her brown eyes following Sophie's trembling form, a seed of rebellion taking root. The plane's engines rumbled, taxing toward takeoff, but the real turbulence was just beginning, a spark in economy ready to ignite a blaze in Chicago. Vanessa Reed's clipboard trembled slightly, her pale green eyes darting back to the Carters as if searching for a crack in their resolve. "Rules are rules," she snapped, cutting James off before he could press further. "You'll need to move to economy until we sort this out." Her tone carried a finality that dared defiance, but James didn't flinch. His broad shoulders squared, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a steadiness that made her blink. "Can we speak to your supervisor?" he asked, his voice calm, but edged with steel. Elena leaned forward, her navy maxi dress rustling, her brown eyes narrowing to slits. "If this is such a common glitch, where's the manager?" she demanded, her words slicing through the cabin's hum. Sophie paused her doodling, a half-drawn plane in green crayon, and glanced up, her small brow furrowing. "Are we in trouble, Daddy?" she whispered, clutching Buddy tighter. James rested a hand on her shoulder, his touch a quiet anchor. "No, sweetheart. Just a mix-up," he said, though his jaw tightened. Vanessa's smirk crept out, a venomous twist of her lips as she planted her hands on her hips. "I am the supervisor here," she said, her voice dripping with smug authority. "Move. Now." The cabin stirred. Charles Wentworth lowered his glass, eyebrows raised, while the woman in sunglasses snapped a photo, her phone flashing briefly. Whispers rippled, a soft wave of judgment. Vanessa snapped her fingers, sharp as a gunshot, summoning two male attendants. Mike, a burly man with a buzz cut, and Derek, wiry with a patchy beard, loomed behind her, their presence a silent threat. Mike cracked his knuckles, the pop echoing, while Derek shifted, his eyes uneasy but obedient. Sophie whimpered, shrinking into her seat, her sketchpad sliding to the floor. Elena pulled her close, her arm a shield, but her glare could have burned through steel. "This necessary?" James asked, nodding at the attendants, his tone low, dangerous. Vanessa folded her arms, her badge glinting like a medal. "Just ensuring compliance," she said icily. "Let's not make a scene." James weighed his options, his mind a chessboard. Push back, risk escalation, or de-escalate for Sophie's sake. He rose slowly, his 6'3" frame towering over Vanessa, and gestured to his family. "Fine," he said, his voice a quiet thunder. "We'll move, but this isn't over." Elena scooped up Sophie, cradling her against her chest, and grabbed the backpack with a swift yank. James slung the duffel over his shoulder, his steps measured as they walked toward economy, heads high despite the sting. Vanessa's chest puffed with victory, oblivious to Tina Brooks lingering near the galley, her young face pale with guilt. Tina clutched her tray, her brown eyes following Sophie's trembling form, a seed of rebellion taking root. The plane's engines rumbled, taxiing toward takeoff, but the real turbulence was just beginning, a spark in economy ready to ignite a blaze in Chicago. The economy cabin of Horizon Air Flight 719 felt like a downgrade, in more ways than one. Its cramped seats a jarring shift from the plush comfort of first class. James Carter wedged his broad frame into a middle row, his denim jacket bunched awkwardly, his long legs jammed against the tray table. Elena settled Sophie by the window, tucking the bumblebee backpack at her feet. Buddy the bear clutched tight in her daughter's small arms. The air smelled of stale pretzels and recycled tension, a far cry from the polished calm they'd left behind. Sophie stared out at the clouds, her sketchpad open but untouched, her green crayon line forgotten. "Why'd we have to move, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small, her curls drooping. Elena smoothed her navy maxi dress, her brown eyes softening despite the anger simmering beneath. "Just a silly mistake, baby," she said, though the lie sat heavy on her tongue. James rested a hand on her knee, his touch steadying, but his jaw was tight, a storm brewing behind his calm. Around them, the cabin buzzed with restless energy. An older man in the next row snored loudly, his head lolling, while a college kid blasted hip-hop through leaky earbuds, the tinny beat grating. Across the aisle, Eddie Malone slouched in a stained gray hoodie, his gold chain glinting under the cabin lights. His sunburned face twisted into a smirk as he leaned over, his breath heavy with peanuts. "Should have known your place, huh?" he jeered, loud enough to draw eyes. Elena's head snapped up, her gaze blazing. "Mind your own damn business," she hissed, her words a whip crack that silenced him, though his grin lingered, nasty and unchallenged. James exhaled slowly, his fingers drumming a rhythm on his knee, his dark eyes fixed on the seatback. He pulled out his phone, the screen glowing faintly, and tapped a message to his assistant, Karen. "Check Flight 719 crew. Lead attendant. Complaints, history, anything racial." Now the whoosh of the send button cut through the engine's drone, a small act of defiance in a moment of humiliation. In the galley, Vanessa Reed leaned against a counter, her navy uniform pristine, a styrofoam cup of coffee steaming in her hand. Her blonde bun gleamed under the fluorescent lights, her pale green eyes glinting with smug satisfaction. "They didn't even fight back," she bragged to Mike, the burly attendant, her voice low and gloating. "Typical." Mike grunted, picking at his nails, but Tina Brooks hovered nearby, her tray of napkins trembling. Her round face paled, her brown eyes darting toward economy, where Sophie's small form slumped against the window. Guilt gnawed at her, Vanessa's lie about the glitch echoing in her mind, but fear kept her silent. For now. Tina's hands shook as she stacked napkins, Vanessa's laughter a bitter sting in the galley. She glanced again toward economy, where James sat, his broad shoulders hunched, his denim jacket a shield against the cabin's prying eyes. Elena leaned close to Sophie, whispering something that made the girl nod, though her sketchpad remained blank, the green crayon rolling to the floor. James's phone buzzed, Karen's reply lighting the screen. "Vanessa Reed. 3 complaints, racial bias, buried by HR. Digging deeper." His lips twitched, not a smile but a predator scenting blood. He typed back, "Keep pushing, find everything." The plane droned on, slicing through clouds, but the real turbulence churned within. Eddie Malone's taunt still echoed, a splinter under Elena's skin. She muttered to James, her voice a low burn, "People like him never learn." James nodded, his fingers stilling on his knee. "They will," he said, his deep voice a quiet vow, his gaze shifting to Sophie, who hugged Buddy tighter, her small face etched with confusion. Back in the galley, Vanessa sipped her coffee, the bitter steam curling up as she scrolled the passenger manifest on a tablet, her lips pursing at the Carters' names. "They don't belong up there," she hissed to Mike, her tone venomous. "Glitch or not, I know who fits." Mike shrugged, his buzz cut glistening with sweat. but Tina's breath caught. She stepped forward, her voice timid. "Their tickets checked out, though," she said, pointing at the screen. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her grip denting the cup. "Doesn't matter," she snapped, slamming the tablet down. "You'll learn how this works." Tina recoiled, her unease blooming into a knot, but she nodded faintly, too green to challenge her. Vanessa turned away, smoothing her uniform, her mind already spinning plans to cement her victory, blind to the crack forming in her control. In economy, the Carters sat shoulder to shoulder, a family under siege but unbroken. Sophie finally picked up her crayon, sketching a plane, but its wings were jagged, flames licking the edges, a child's vision of the hurt she couldn't name. Elena's heart clenched, her hand stroking Sophie's curls, but her eyes met James's, a shared resolve burning. "She's got no idea who she's messing with," Elena whispered, her voice steel over Sophie's head. James's lips curved faintly, a ghost of a smirk. "Not yet," he said, his words a promise wrapped in shadow. The plane tilted slightly, beginning its descent toward Chicago, the cabin lights dimming as trays rattled. Vanessa's smugness lingered like a storm cloud, but James's phone buzzed again. Karen's next message, a lifeline. Found a link. Vanessa's got a friend, ex-cop, trouble. The spark of her misstep was about to ignite, a reckoning waiting in the wings when they landed at O'Hare. The economy cabin of Horizon Air Flight 719 vibrated with the low hum of engines, but the air crackled with a different energy as James Carter sat wedged between Elena and Sophie, his denim jacket stiff with tension. Sophie hugged Buddy, her bumblebee backpack tucked away, her sketchpad open to a jagged plane wreathed in flames, a child's silent cry. Elena's navy maxi dress bunched awkwardly in the cramped seat, her brown eyes fierce but weary as she stroked Sophie's curls. James's phone buzzed against his thigh. Karen's updates a lifeline. Vanessa Reed's history of complaints was a ticking bomb, and her ex-cop friend raised red flags. He pocketed the device, his jaw tight, his dark eyes scanning the aisle for Vanessa's next move. The college kid's earbuds leaked Bess, the snoring man's wheeze a grating rhythm, but it was Eddie Malone's lingering smirk across the aisle that burned hottest, his gold chain glinting like a taunt. The intercom chimed, slicing through the cabin's drone, and the captain's voice boomed, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, a brief announcement. Mr. Carter and family, please return to your first-class seats immediately. We apologize for the inconvenience." A gasp rippled through the plane, heads craning, whispers erupting. Sophie's eyes widened, a spark of hope lighting her small face. "We're going back, Daddy?" she asked, clutching Buddy. James nodded, his deep voice soft but resolute. "Right where we belong, sweetheart." Elena's lips curved, a mix of relief and defiance, but her grip on Sophie's hand stayed firm. In economy, Eddie Malone's face twisted into a scowl, muttering, "What the hell?" as he fumbled for his phone, fingers itching to spin the moment into poison. James rose, his 6'3" frame unfolding with quiet power, and gestured to his family. Elena scooped up Sophie, cradling her against her chest, while James slung the navy duffel over his shoulder, its weight a familiar ally. They strode back to first class, heads high, the aisle a gauntlet of stairs, some pitying, others awed. Charles Wentworth clapped slowly, his bourbon glass clinking, a rare nod from old money. The woman in sunglasses lowered her shades, her crimson nails still, her phone flashing as she posted, "Karma's first class. Horizon Air." The cabin buzzed, a chorus of, "About time," rippling through. Vanessa Reed stood frozen by the galley, her navy uniform pristine but her pale green eyes wide, her coffee cup slipping to splatter brown across the floor. Her blonde bun tilted slightly, her smirk gone, replaced by a slack-jawed gape as the Carters reclaimed their seats. James settled back into seat 2A, his denim jacket draped over the armrest, his broad frame filling the first-class space with a quiet authority that silenced the cabin's hum. Elena tucked Sophie into the window seat, Buddy propped beside her, the bumblebee backpack stowed below. Sophie's sketchpad flipped to a fresh page, her small hands clutching a blue crayon, a tentative smile breaking through. "We're back, Mommy," she chirped, her curls bouncing. Elena nodded, her navy maxi dress smoothing as she sat, her brown eyes softening but sharp with vigilance. "Right where we belong, baby," she said, her voice steady, yet laced with steel. James caught her glance, a shared resolve burning. They'd won this round, but the fight was far from over. He leaned back, his dark eyes scanning the aisle, sensing Vanessa's shadow lurking beyond the galley curtain. Vanessa emerged, her navy uniform still crisp, but her pinched face flushed, her blonde bun askew like her unraveling control. She strode to the Carter's row, her heels clicking softer now, her posture rigid with forced composure. "I apologize for the inconvenience," she said, her voice clipped, each word dragged out as if it scorched her throat. Her pale green eyes darted between James, Elena, and Sophie, her forced smile cracking under the weight of her rage. James leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees, his gaze drilling through her. "Inconvenience?" he repeated, his deep voice flat, letting the word hang like a blade. Elena's eyebrow arched, her fingers tightening around Sophie's crayon box, but she stayed silent, letting James lead. Sophie doodled a plane with bright wings, humming softly, unaware of the storm simmering above her. "I mean, a misunderstanding," Vanessa backtracked, her tone sharpening as she shifted her weight, her badge glinting defiantly. "It's resolved now." She spun abruptly, her steps jerky, retreating to the galley like a soldier fleeing a lost battle. Tina Brooks lingered nearby, her round face pale, her brown eyes flickering with guilt as she handed Sophie a tiny pack of pretzels. "For your bear," she mumbled, her voice barely audible, a small rebellion against Vanessa's reign. James caught the gesture, filing it away, an ally, perhaps, in the war ahead. Elena leaned close, her voice a whisper over Sophie's head. "She's furious," she said, her eyes narrowing. James nodded, his jaw tightening. "Good," he muttered, his calm a fortress around his fury. His phone buzzed. Karen's update. Vanessa's friend, Carl Brody, has priors, linked to her on past flights. The plane began its descent toward Chicago, the cabin lights dimming, but James's mind raced, plotting the next move. Vanessa's retreat was no surrender. It was a reload, and O'Hare's tarmac promised a trap primed to spring. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Chicago's O'Hare International Airport as Horizon Air Flight 719 screeched to a halt, its engines winding down with a weary groan. James Carter led his family off the jetway, his denim jacket slung over one shoulder, the navy duffel heavy in his grip. His broad frame moved with purpose, but his dark eyes scanned the terminal, sensing the weight of unseen eyes. Elena followed, her navy maxi dress swaying, her hand clasped around Sophie's, whose bumblebee backpack bounced with each step. Sophie clutched Buddy, her sketch pad tucked under her arm, her small face bright with the promise of Chicago's skyline. "Can we see the big bean, Daddy?" she asked, her curls bobbing. James forced a smile, his deep voice warm but strained. "Soon, sweetheart," he said, though his jaw tightened. Karen's warning about Vanessa's ex-cop friend, Carl Brody, looping in his mind. The terminal buzzed with evening chaos, travelers hauling suitcases, announcements crackling overhead. Elena's brown eyes darted, her instincts prickling as they neared baggage claim. She leaned close to James, her voice low. "Something's off," she murmured, her grip on Sophie tightening. He nodded, his stride slowing, his senses tingling like they had in boardrooms facing hostile takeovers. A man in a faded leather jacket brushed past, his shoulder clipping James's with deliberate force. Carl Brody, 50, with a gray buzz cut and a predator's smirk, melted into the crowd, his hand slipping from his pocket. James adjusted the duffel, oblivious to the small baggie of white powder now nestled in an outer flap. Carl's plant as smooth as a snake's strike. The Carters reached baggage claim, a cavernous hall of whirring belts, where Sophie pointed at a circling suitcase. "That one's funny," she giggled, unaware of the storm closing in. 4 TSA agents in navy polos swarmed from the crowd, their radios crackling, faces hard. The leader, Agent Perez, a stocky man with a shaved head, zeroed in on James, his hand hovering near his holster. "James Carter," he barked, his voice a gunshot in the din. James turned, his calm unshaken, his broad shoulders squaring. "That's me," he said, his tone even. Perez smirked, a nasty twist of his lips. Got a tip. Need to search your bag. Elena's breath caught, her eyes narrowing as she pulled Sophie behind her. What tip? She demanded, her voice slicing through the noise. Perez ignored her, snapping his fingers at a wiry agent who snatched the duffel, unzipping it with a vicious tug. James's heart thudded, but his face stayed a mask. He knew a setup when he saw one, and Vanessa's stench was all over this. The wiry TSA agent's gloved hand rummaged through James's duffel, tossing aside Sophie's sketchpad and a folded hoodie, then froze. He pulled out the baggie, the white powder stark against the black plastic, holding it up like a trophy. Well, well, Perez sneered, his eyes glinting with triumph. Got a problem here. The terminal gasped, a collective inhale as travelers whipped out phones, flashes popping like gunfire. James's jaw clenched, a flicker of shock breaking his calm before he recovered. That's not mine, he said, his deep voice steel, stepping closer. Elena's scream tore through the chaos. You planted that, she yelled, her navy maxi dress flaring as she lunged forward, only to be shoved back by another agent. Sophie wailed, burying her face in Elena's hip, Buddy dangling from her grip, her small voice keening. Daddy! James's heart twisted, but his eyes stayed locked on Perez, reading the setup's script. Carl's brush, Vanessa's revenge. Perez chuckled, a low, dirty sound, and signaled his team. Cuff him, he ordered, his tone final. Two agents surged, yanking James's arms back, the metal cuffs biting his wrist with a cold snap. He stumbled, his denim jacket tearing as a fist grazed his lip, splitting it open. Blood trickled down his chin, a red streak against his dark skin, and his knees hit the tile with a dull thud. Elena clawed at Perez's arm, her hands desperate, but the third agent pushed her dress tangling as she caught Sophie before they fell. Get off him, she roared, tears streaking her face, her voice raw with fury. Sophie's sobs echoed, piercing the terminal's roar, her sketchpad tumbling to the floor, crayons scattering like shrapnel. Perez loomed over James, his smirk widening. Tell it to the judge, he snapped, nodding to his team. They hauled James up, his boots scuffing, blood dripping as they dragged him toward a security door. From the jetway's mouth, Vanessa Reed watched, her navy uniform a stark silhouette, her blonde bun pristine despite the chaos. Her pale green eyes glinted with victory, a venomous smile curling her lips. Got them, she muttered, her arms crossed, drinking in the gasps of passengers streaming past. Phones thrust high, footage hit the internet in real time. Yak Horizon bus trending as Eddie Malone, lurking near a coffee kiosk, posted a blurry clip. First-class fraud busted at O'Hare. But Marissa Tate, Elena's journalist friend, stood at baggage claim, her camera rolling, capturing Carl's fleeting smirk in the crowd. Elena, trembling, pulled out her phone, dialing Rachel Cohen, their lawyer. They've got James, she choked, Sophie clinging to her. Planted drugs. Get here now. As the security door slammed behind James, Marissa's lens caught Tina Brooks lingering near the gate, her face pale, fingers typing a frantic, anonymous text. Vanessa set them up. I saw her call Carl. The trap was set, but a crack was forming, ready to shatter at Chicago's cold dawn. The Chicago precinct's holding cell reeked of bleach and despair, its concrete walls slick with damp under flickering fluorescent lights. James Carter sat on a metal cot, his denim jacket torn at the sleeve, his wrists raw from cuffs now removed. Blood crusted his split lip, a dull ache pulsing where a guard's fist had landed during booking. A deliberate jab from a beefy officer with a shaved head who'd sneered, "Big shot, huh?" James's broad frame hunched slightly, his dark eyes burning with a fire no cell could snuff. He replayed O'Hare's chaos, Carl's brush, the baggie, Sophie's wails, each moment a knife twisting deeper. Vanessa's pale green eyes haunted him, her smirk a signature on this setup. But he thought of Elena, her fierce scream, and Sophie clutching Buddy, and forced himself to breathe. His empire had faced worse. He'd built it from nothing against sneers like these. This was just another fight. Outside, Elena ushered Sophie into a downtown Chicago hotel, the city's neon glow a harsh contrast to her daughter's trembling form. Sophie's bumblebee backpack slumped by the door, Buddy pressed tight to her chest, her sketchpad forgotten. Is Daddy okay? She whispered, her curls drooping, her small face etched with fear. Elena's navy maxi dress clung to her skin, damp with sweat and tears, but her brown eyes blazed with resolve. He's strong, baby, she said, kneeling to hug her voice steady despite the crack in her heart. We're getting him back. She tucked Sophie into bed, singing a soft lullaby, then grabbed her phone, dialing Rachel Cohen, their lawyer. James is locked up, she said, her tone urgent. Planted drugs. TSA's dirty. Fix it. Rachel's voice crackled through, calm but sharp. I'm on it. Stay put. We'll move fast. Marissa Tate, Elena's journalist friend, was already working angles from her Atlanta newsroom, her fingers flying over a laptop. Tina Brooks's anonymous text. Vanessa set them up. I saw her call Carl. Burned in her mind. A lead too hot to ignore. She cross-checked flight logs, finding Carl Brody's name tied to Vanessa's past routes, his priors a trail of assault and bribery. Marissa called Pastor Daniel Hayes, a community leader in Atlanta, his deep voice a rallying cry. We need people, Daniel, she urged. O'Hare, tomorrow. This is bigger than James. Daniel agreed, his church's network buzzing, planning a dawn protest to shake Chicago's streets. Elena, pacing the hotel room, got Marissa's update. Protest at 7 a.m. I've got Brody's dirt. Her grip tightened, a spark of hope amid the dark. She'd fight for James, no matter the cost. In the cell, James paced 3 steps one way, 3 back, the concrete biting his boots. The guard's taunt echoed, but he pushed it aside, his mind racing. Vanessa's setup was slick but sloppy. Carl's priors, Karen's digging, Tina's tip via Marissa. They were threads he could pull. He scratched a note on a scrap of paper, a message for Sophie. Keep drawing, baby girl. Daddy's coming home. The act grounded him, a tether to his family beyond these walls. His dark eyes fixed on a crack in the ceiling, his resolve ironclad. He'd faced boardrooms that spat on his name and built horizon air from their doubts. Vanessa thought she'd caged him, but she'd misread the man. She'd lit a fuse, not a trap. At the hotel, Elena sat by Sophie's bedside, her daughter's soft snores a fragile comfort. Her phone glowed with Marissa's texts, each one a weapon. Brody's linked to a dirty cop network. Vanessa called him pre-landing. Elena's jaw clenched, her navy maxi dress creased from pacing. She dialed Rachel again, her voice a blade. Marissa's got footage, O'Hare cameras. Brody planted it. Push for bail. Rachel promised a morning hearing, but Elena's trust in the system waned. She glanced at Sophie, clutching Buddy, and whispered, We'll burn it down if we have to. Outside, Chicago's skyline glittered, indifferent to her war. Marissa's call came next, urgent. Pastor Daniel's got hundreds ready. O'Hare's gonna shake. Elena nodded, her brown eyes steel, already picturing the crowd, their voices a tide to lift James free. Across town, Vanessa met Carl and Eddie Malone in a dive bar, the air thick with cigarette smoke and cheap whiskey. Her Navy uniform was gone, swapped for a black sweater, her blonde bun loose, pale green eyes wild with triumph. He's done, she bragged, slamming a shot glass down, her voice slurred but sharp. Cops bought the plant. Carl, in his leather jacket, grunted, wiping beer foam from his lip. Told you it'd stick, Trish. Eddie scrolled his phone, his gold chain glinting, posting lies. Carter's a dealer. Carter crime. The hashtag trended, a digital noose tightening. But Marissa's footage was spreading too, a grainy clip of Carl's plant hitting X, cracks forming in Vanessa's plot. At the precinct, James lay on the cot, blood crusted on his lip, his mind plotting beyond the bars. Pastor Daniel's voice reached him through a distant radio, singing Amazing Grace from a vigil outside, a beacon in the dark. Dawn was coming, and with it, a protest to rattle O'Hare's gates, setting the stage for James's fight to claw back his name. Dawn broke over Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, painting the sky a fiery orange as a restless crowd gathered outside Terminal 3. Pastor Daniel Hayes stood at the forefront, his gray suit crisp, his deep voice booming through a megaphone. Justice for James Carter. Hundreds answered, their signs bobbing. Free Carter now. In bold red, end bias in the skies. In jagged black. The air crackled with fury and hope, a tide of voices shaking the glass walls. Elena Carter stood among them, her navy maxi dress swapped for a black sweater and jeans, Sophie clutching her hand, Buddy tucked under her arm. Sophie's bumblebee backpack hung loose, her small face solemn but brave. "Will Daddy see us?" she asked, her curls catching the morning light. Elena knelt, her brown eyes fierce yet tender. "He'll feel us, baby," she said, her voice a vow, her heart pounding with the crowd's pulse. Inside a Chicago courtroom, Rachel Cohen, the Carters' lawyer, argued for James's bail, her slate gray suit sharp, her voice slicing through the judge's skepticism. Marissa Tate's bombshell footage, Carl Brody planting the baggie at O'Hare, played on a screen, grainy but damning, sparking gas from the gallery. Posted online hours ago, it had exploded across X, Justice for Carter trending as protests swelled from Atlanta to LA. Rachel leaned into the evidence. "This is a frame-up, Your Honor. We have a witness." Tina Brooks, trembling in the witness box, her round face pale, admitted Vanessa's orders to stay silent. "She called Carl before we landed," Tina said, her voice cracking, guilt spilling out. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, granted bail. $50,000, a small victory. James emerged from lockup, his denim jacket torn, his split lips scabbing, but his dark eyes blazing. He limped slightly, the guard's punch a lingering bruise, yet his broad frame stood tall, unbroken. Elena rushed to him outside the precinct, Sophie breaking free to leap into his arms. "Daddy!" she cried, her small hands clinging, Buddy squished between them. James knelt, wincing but smiling, his deep voice thick. "I'm here, sweetheart." Elena's tears fell as she embraced him, her black sweater damp against his chest. Marissa, filming nearby, caught the reunion, her lens panning to Pastor Daniel leading a hymn. "Amazing Grace," the crowd's voices soaring, but Vanessa Reed, now suspended, watched from a dive bar across town, her blonde hair loose, her pale green eyes wild. She slammed a whiskey shot, muttering to Carl Brody, "This ain't over." Carl, in his leather jacket, nodded, his buzz cut glinting. Eddie Malone scrolled his phone, his gold chain swinging, plotting a new smear. The Carters' triumph was a spark, but Vanessa's rage was gasoline, ready to ignite. The Chicago streets pulsed with the protests' aftershocks, Pastor Daniel's crowd spilling beyond O'Hare, their chants echoing off skyscrapers. James stood with Elena and Sophie outside the precinct, his denim jacket hanging loose, blood crusted on his lip. Sophie clutched his hand, her bumblebee backpack swaying, Buddy pressed tight, her small voice steady now. "You're back, Daddy," she said, a smile breaking through. Elena's black sweater clung to her brown eyes scanning the crowd. Pastor Daniel's hymn fading into shouts of "Carter's free." But her relief was tempered by vigilance. James's phone buzzed, Marissa's text blazing. Vanessa's linked to Carl on 3 flights, Fed sniffing. He showed Elena, his jaw tightening. "They're scrambling," he muttered, his deep voice a rumble of resolve. She nodded, her hand squeezing his, a shared fire burning. They'd won this round, but Vanessa's shadow loomed. At the dive bar, Vanessa's whiskey glass trembled, her black sweater stained, her blonde hair a wild tangle. Carl cracked his knuckles, his leather jacket creaking, while Eddie Malone posted a doctored video. James, shaking hands with a blurred figure, captioned Carter's cartel ties. It spread like wildfire. Warashin Carter crime clawing back traction, sowing doubt among some protesters. Vanessa smirked, her pale green eyes glinting. "Hit him where it hurts," she hissed, dialing a burner phone. "Carl, make it personal." Across town, a rally swelled near City Hall, Pastor Daniel urging unity, but Carl struck from the shadows. He slipped through the crowd, his buzz cut hidden under a cap, and lunged at James during a speech, a knife flashing. The blade grazed James's arm, blood blooming through his jacket, but Elena shoved Carl back, her scream raw. "Not my family," security swarmed, pinning Carl, his knife clattering as protesters roared, signs swinging like weapons. James staggered, clutching his arm, Sophie's wail piercing the chaos. "Daddy!" she cried, dropping Buddy, her sketch pad tumbling. Elena knelt beside him, tearing her sweater to bind the wound, her hands steady despite her trembling voice. "You're okay," she whispered, her brown eyes fierce. Marissa filmed it all, her footage countering Eddie's lies, X lighting up with Carter attacked. Tina, watching from a safe distance, texted Marissa again. "Vanessa planned this. I'm done hiding." Pastor Daniel led a prayer, calming the crowd, but James's gaze hardened, blood seeping through Elena's makeshift bandage. He whispered, "She's desperate now," his voice steel despite the pain. Rachel called, her voice urgent. "Feds want Vanessa. Stay safe." The rally's fire burned hotter, a prelude to the courtroom battle ahead. Vanessa's recklessness cracking her empire, setting the stage for justice to strike. The federal courthouse in Chicago loomed like a gray stone fortress, its halls buzzing with reporters and protesters spilling onto the steps, their signs screaming, "Justice for Carter," in bold black ink. Inside, James Carter sat at the defendant's table, his dark blazer crisp despite the bandage on his arm from Carl's knife attack, his split lip a scabbing reminder of O'Hare's betrayal. His dark eyes burned with resolve, his broad frame steady under the courtroom's harsh lights. Elena watched from the gallery, her black sweater a quiet shield, her brown eyes fierce as she gripped Sophie's hand. Sophie, backstage with a sitter, clutched Buddy in her bumblebee backpack, her small face tense, sensing the stakes. Rachel Cohen, their lawyer, stood ready, her slate gray suit sharp, her legal briefs a weapon honed for battle. The air crackled. This wasn't just a trial, it was a war for truth. Vanessa Reed took the stand first, her Navy uniform gone, swapped for a cheap Navy blazer, her blonde hair pulled into a severe ponytail. Her pale green eyes darted, her voice quivering with rehearsed fear. "He threatened me," she lied, pointing at James, her finger trembling for effect. "Said he'd ruin me if I questioned his seats." The jury, all white, their faces carved from skepticism, nodded faintly, a dagger in James's chest. Carl Brody followed, his leather jacket traded for a rumpled suit, his gray buzz cut slicked back. "Saw him with the drugs myself," he growled, his tone slick with practice, avoiding James's piercing gaze. Rachel leaped up, her voice a blade. "Objection! No evidence supports these claims." But Judge Howard Grayson, a paunchy man with a lazy drawl and a good old boy smirk, raised a hand, his jowls quivering. "Overrule," he said, leaning back, his bias a heavy fog settling over the room. Rachel presented Marissa Tate's footage, Carl planting the baggie at O'Hare, clear as day on the courtroom screen. Gasps rippled, but Grayson banged his gavel, his drawl thick. "Irrelevant to possession, counselor. Move on." Rachel's jaw dropped, her eyes blazing, while Elena's hands clenched, her sweater stretching taut. James's calm cracked, his fist tightening under the table, sensing the system's claws tightening. Outside, Pastor Daniel Hayes led chants, his megaphone booming, "Truth will rise." Marissa, in the press row, typed furiously, her scoop on Grayson's past, ties to Carl's old precinct, half-formed but growing. Vanessa's lips twitched, a flicker of triumph, blind to the storm brewing beyond her lies, a storm Elena was ready to unleash. The courtroom's fluorescent lights buzzed as Judge Grayson's gavel fell again, his smirk a silent ally to Vanessa's lies. James sat rigid, his dark blazer taut across his shoulders, his dark eyes locked on the jury, willing them to see past the script Vanessa and Carl spun. Elena's black sweater clung to her brown eyes blazing from the gallery, her fingers trembling as she texted Marissa, "Dig into Grayson." Now Marissa, hunched over her phone, unearthed a lead. Grayson's golf outings with Carl's precinct buddies, whispers of hush money. She forwarded it to Rachel, who adjusted her strategy mid-trial, hammering Vanessa's history. "3 racial complaints, buried by horizon," Rachel snapped, waving documents Tina Brooks had smuggled out. Vanessa flinched, her ponytail bobbing, but Grayson stifled the attack. "Stick to the charge," he drawled, his jowls shaking, crushing truth with each bang of his gavel. The jury deliberated, their whispers abuzz behind closed doors, leaving James to face Elena, her face etched with dread. They're rigging it, she whispered, her voice a thread of steel, Sophie's absence a weight between them. James gripped her hand, his deep voice steady despite the storm inside. "We'll break through," he said, his split lip twitching, his bandage itching under his sleeve. But the verdict landed like a thunderclap. Guilty, 5 years for possession. Gasps erupted, reporters scribbling, Elena bolting up, her scream swallowed by the courtroom's roar. "This is a lie!" she yelled, her sweater fluttering as Rachel steadied her. James rose, his blazer a shroud, his eyes locking with Elena's. "Keep fighting," he said, his voice cutting through before bailiffs cuffed him, the metal biting his wrists, his boots echoing as they dragged him away. Vanessa smirked from the witness stand, her cheap blazer a badge of victory, thinking she'd won. Carl adjusted his tie, chuckling low while Marissa's fingers flew, leaking Grayson's ties to X, corrupt judge in Carter trial trending within hours. Elena collapsed onto a bench, her hands shaking, but her resolve hardened. She dialed Marissa, her voice ablade. "Expose Grayson, flood it." Outside, Pastor Daniel's protest surged, signs now reading, "System failed." The courthouse steps became a battleground, Rachel vowing an appeal, Tina's guilt pushing her to gather more evidence. Vanessa slipped away, her pale green eyes wild, dialing a new contact, Vic, a hitman, to ensure James never rose again. The trial's injustice was a spark, igniting a rally where Elena's blood would spill, a desperate act to silence the Carter's roar. Chicago's downtown streets pulsed with raw energy as a massive rally swelled outside City Hall, the gray sky heavy with the weight of injustice. Signs bobbed in the crowd. "Justice for Carter." In bold red, "Horizon must fall." In stark black, while chants of "Free the Truth" shook the pavement. James Carter stood on a makeshift stage, his denim jacket swapped for a dark blazer, a bandage on his arm from Carl's knife attack peeking beneath his sleeve. His split lip had scabbed, but his dark eyes burned with unyielding resolve, his broad frame a beacon amid the chaos. Elena stood beside him, her black sweater a quiet banner, her brown eyes fierce despite the sling cradling her right arm, her shoulders still raw from shielding Sophie during a recent scuffle. Sophie was safe backstage with Leon, their grizzled security chief clutching Buddy in her bumblebee backpack, sketching planes to calm her nerves. James gripped the microphone, his deep voice booming over the crowd. "They tried to break us. Vanessa Reed, Carl Brody, a system that looks the other way. But we're still here." The crowd roared, a sea of fists pumping, Pastor Daniel Hayes at the forefront, his gray suit soaked with sweat, his prayers fueling their fire. Marissa Tate, Elena's journalist friend, live-streamed from the sidelines, her camera catching every word, X ablaze with hashtag Carter Fights Back. Rachel Cohen, their lawyer, had just exposed Judge Grayson's ties to Carl in court, forcing a mistrial, but Vanessa's desperation had birthed a darker plan. Unknown to the Carters, Vic, a wiry hitman in a black cap, slipped through the rally, his pistol cold under his jacket, his eyes locked on James. Vanessa, holed up in an Indiana motel, had wired him $50,000 from her offshore stash, her pale green eyes wild as she hissed into a burner phone. "End him today." Elena's instincts flared mid-speech, her gaze catching a glint of metal in the crowd. "James!" she shouted, shoving him aside as Vic fired. A muffled crack lost in the chants. The bullet tore through her shoulder, blood blooming across her sweater, and she collapsed into James's arms, her gasp ragged. The crowd erupted, screams swallowing the rally, signs swinging like clubs. James cradled Elena, his blazer soaking red, his deep voice roaring, "No!" Sophie's wail pierced from backstage, her sketchpad tumbling as Leon rushed her away. Marissa's lens caught Vic's retreat, his cap torn off by an angry protester, his pistol kicked into the gutter. Leon charged through the rally's chaos, his grizzled frame a bulldozer, tackling Vic to the pavement as cops swarmed, cuffs snapping tight around the hitman's wrists. James knelt beside Elena, her blood slick on his hands, his dark eyes wide with panic but his voice steady. "Stay with me," he pleaded, pressing his blazer against her shoulder, the wound a raw mess beneath her sweater. Elena's brown eyes fluttered, pain etching her face, but she gripped his arm, her whisper fierce. "Finish this!" The crowd surged, some protesters clashing with police, others forming a protective ring around the Carters, Pastor Daniel's voice rising in prayer to calm the storm. Sophie sobbed backstage, clutching Buddy, her small hands trembling as Leon shielded her, barking orders to his team. Marissa kept filming, her footage streaming live. Carter wife shot at rally, X exploding with outrage, Durarhorn Elena Strong trending within minutes. Paramedics rushed in, stretchers clattering, prying Elena from James's arms. Her sweater hung in tatters, blood pooling as they loaded her into an ambulance, sirens wailing into Chicago's dusk. James climbed in, his blazer discarded, his shirt stained red, his split lip quivering, but his resolve ironclad. Sophie stayed with Leon, her wail fading as the ambulance doors slammed. At the Indiana motel, Vanessa watched the news on a grainy TV, her blonde hair a tangled mess, her black hoodie stained with coffee. The rally footage looped, Elena's fall, Vic's arrest, her tequila shot frozen midair, her pale green eyes wide with glee. "Got him," she muttered, thinking Elena's hit would break James. But her burner phone buzzed, a text from Carl. Feds closing in, Vic's singing. Her glass slipped, shattering on the floor, her victory souring as reality dawned. She'd overplayed her hand. Marissa's investigation hit a new gear, her laptop glowing with evidence. Vanessa's $50,000 wire to Vic, traced to an offshore account tied to Horizon's hush money. She texted Rachel. "Vanessa's done. Feds have the contract." Tina Brooks, now fully turned, met Marissa in secret, handing over Vanessa's old emails, orders to silence complaints, proof of her vendetta. Pastor Daniel's church streamed a vigil online, millions joining, their candles a digital sea of hope. James sat in the ambulance, Elena's hand limp in his, her pulse faint but stubborn. "You're not leaving us," he whispered, his deep voice cracking, blood crusted on his knuckles. O'Hare's runways shut down as protests raged, Horizon's logo spray-painted with liars. The feds raided Vanessa's motel hours later, her door splintering, her screams drowned by sirens. James's empire teetered, but Elena's fight for life was the spark to topple Horizon, a blaze ready to consume its rot in the courtroom's next dawn. Chicago's skyline gleamed under a cold morning sun, but the glass tower of Horizon Air's headquarters stood like a mausoleum, its once proud logo tarnished by scandal. Inside, James Carter strode through the executive suite, his dark blazer crisp despite the bandage on his arm, his split lip a faint scar. His dark eyes burned with purpose, a man reclaiming his ground after weeks of war. Elena rested in a hospital bed across town, her shoulders stitched, her black sweater swapped for a gown, her brown eyes weak but fierce as she urged him via phone. "End them, James." Sophie sat beside her, Buddy in her lap, sketching planes with gold wings, her bumblebee backpack a quiet sentinel. James carried their strength, his broad frame a fortress as he faced Victor Lang, Horizon's CEO, a slick man with a forced smile and a tie too tight for his trembling neck. James slammed a tablet onto Lang's desk, its screen glowing with Marissa Tate's evidence. Emails, call logs, bank transfers, proving Vanessa Reed's bias was buried by Horizon's board. "You knew," James said, his deep voice a low growl, each word a blade. "3 complaints, swept under." "You let her frame me." Lang's eyes darted, his hands fluttering. "Mr. Carter, let's discuss," he stammered, but James cut him off. "No deals, you're done." Outside, Pastor Daniel Hayes led a protest, thousands strong, their chants, Horizon lies, shaking the streets. Marissa's latest scoop hit X, Horizon board hit attendance racism, trending with Equirkisha Carter justice, crashing Horizon stock by 15 points overnight. Rachel Cohen, their lawyer, filed a $2 billion suit, her slate gray suit a banner as she briefed reporters. "Negligence, defamation, conspiracy. This ends now." Vanessa Reed's arrest flashed on news screens, her motel raid a spectacle, her blonde hair wild, her black hoodie torn as feds cuffed her pale green eyes dull with shock. Vic's confession tied her to the rally shooting, Carl Brody's plea deal spilling her every move. In a Brooklyn jail, Eddie Malone stewed, his gold chain gone, his bots silenced, conspiracy charges pinning him down. James watched the feeds from Lang's office, his jaw tight, but his mind raced to Elena's bedside, her survival, the true victory. Lang slumped, his voice pleading. "We'll settle, James. Name your price." James leaned closer, his gaze steel. "I don't want your money. I want your empire." The words landed like a guillotine, Horizon's death knell ringing as James planned his next strike, a phoenix rising from their ashes. Victor Lang's office felt smaller as James towered over him, the tablet's evidence a noose tightening around Horizon's neck. Lang's plea faltered, his slick facade crumbling, sweat beading on his brow. "You can't just," he started, but James's deep voice cut through, cold and final. "I already did." He'd bought Horizon's rival, Phoenix Air, weeks ago, a silent chess move now unveiled. Its golden black jets waited at O'Hare, ready to soar where Horizon would crash. James turned, leaving Lang to his ruin, the protests outside swelling, Pastor Daniel's megaphone blaring. "No more lies." Marissa's footage looped on every screen, Vanessa's emails ordering silence, Carl's plant, Vic's wire transfer. X roared with Horizon falls, the stock plummeting to 10 points, a death spiral no bailout could stop. Rachel's lawsuit grew teeth, naming Lang and 4 board members, their offshore accounts exposed by Tina Brooks's leaked files. Vanessa sat in a Chicago cell, her black hoodie confiscated, her blonde hair a matted wreck, her pale green eyes staring at bars. Her life sentence loomed, Vic's testimony a hammer, Carl's deal a nail. She'd sobbed at her hearing, "I didn't mean it." But the jury's stone faces buried her lies. Carl faced 15 years, his leather jacket a memory, while Eddie Malone got 7, his bots a faded smear. Tina, now free of Vanessa's shadow, met Marissa in a cafe, handing over a final email. Lang's order to handle Vanessa's complaints. "I should have spoken sooner," Tina said, her round face flushed with guilt. Marissa nodded, her scoop sealing Horizon's fate, her article trending, Carter's triumph over corporate rot. Pastor Daniel's vigil outside the hospital drew thousands, their candles a sea of light for Elena, whose recovery fueled the city's rage. James visited Elena, finding her sitting up, her gown loose, her shoulder bandaged but her brown eyes bright. Sophie curled beside her, sketching Phoenix Air's logo, Buddy propped nearby. "We did it," Elena whispered, her voice hoarse but strong, gripping James's hand. He kissed her forehead, his blazer creased, his split lip a badge. "Almost," he said, his dark eyes glinting. Horizon's board was next. Lang's resignation hit the wire, but James wanted more. He texted Leon, "Push the feds. Board's hiding memos." Rachel followed, her voice sharp. "Civil suits ready. Billions." The hospital room hummed, a war room now, as Phoenix Air's launch loomed, a golden black jet to reclaim the skies. Outside, Chicago's streets burned with celebration, Horizon's logo torched in effigy, a prelude to James's empire rising, its wings spreading wide for the world to see. The morning sun bathed Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport in a golden glow, its runways gleaming like ribbons of hope as Phoenix Air's first jet stood proud at Gate C-12. The golden black plane, its wings sharp and defiant, bore a logo that screamed rebirth, a phoenix rising from Horizon Air's ashes. James Carter strode through the terminal, his dark blazer tailored, his split lip a faint scar, his dark eyes alight with triumph. Elena walked beside him, her shoulder healed but stiff, her black sweater swapped for a gold blouse, her brown eyes radiant with pride. Sophie skipped ahead, her bumblebee backpack bouncing, Buddy tucked under her arm, her sketchpad brimming with planes in gold crayon. "Our plane, Daddy," she chirped, her curls dancing. James ruffled her hair, his deep voice warm. "Ours, sweetheart," he said, his broad frame a pillar for the family that had weathered a storm. The terminal buzzed with anticipation, passengers and reporters crowding the gate. Pastor Daniel Hayes stood nearby, his gray suit crisp, offering a blessing over a microphone. May this flight soar above hate. Marissa Tate snapped photos. Her article, Carter's Phoenix Takes Flight, already trending on X with #sign Phoenix Rising. Rachel Cohen, their lawyer, mingled with supporters, her slate gray suit a quiet victory flag, her lawsuits against Horizon's board nearing billions. James, Elena, and Sophie, boarded first class, greeted by cheers from passengers, a stark contrast to their humiliation months ago. Tina Brooks, now Phoenix Air's training manager, welcomed them, her round face beaming. "No bias here," she said, handing Sophie a tiny Phoenix pin. Sophie pinned it to Buddy, giggling, her trust a balm after Vanessa Reed's venom. James settled into seat 2A, Elena beside him, Sophie by the window, sketching furiously. The cabin gleamed, its leather seats soft, the air free of judgment. Elena squeezed his hand, her gold blouse catching the light. "We made it," she whispered, her voice steady but thick. James nodded, his jaw softening, but his mind flashed to a secret kept even from her. In lockup, he'd fed lies to Carl Brody, turning him against Vanessa, a chess move that sparked their downfall. He glanced at Elena, wondering when to tell her. Soon, but not today. Outside, a small counter-protest waved signs. "Carter's a fraud." But Pastor Daniel's supporters drowned them out, their chants a heartbeat. The jet's engines roared, taxiing toward takeoff, a symbol of the Carter's victory, their scars now wings lifting them skyward. The Phoenix Air jet climbed smoothly, its golden black wings slicing through Georgia's morning clouds, the cabin alive with a quiet reverence. James leaned back in his first-class seat, his dark blazer creasing, his dark eyes scanning the horizon through Sophie's window. Elena sat close, her gold blouse a vibrant echo of their new empire, her hand resting on his, her brown eyes reflecting the sky's vast promise. Sophie doodled a plane with shimmering wings, Buddy propped beside her, the Phoenix pin glinting on his fur. "Look, Mommy, we're flying," she squealed, pressing her nose to the glass. Elena smiled, her shoulders stiff but healing, her voice soft. "Higher than ever, baby." The passengers, businessmen, families, a college student snapping selfies, cast warm glances, their applause from boarding still echoing. Tina Brooks moved down the aisle, her navy uniform crisp, her round face glowing with purpose, a far cry from the fear she'd carried under Vanessa's thumb. James's phone buzzed, Marissa's update flashing. "Horizon's stock at 0. Board's done." He showed Elena, his jaw tightening with a flicker of triumph. "They're dust," he murmured, but his mind churned with the prison gambit he'd yet to confess. In lockup, he'd whispered half-truths to Carl Brody, planting doubts about Vanessa's loyalty, a spark that led Carl to flip and expose her. Elena caught his distant look, her eyebrow arching. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her tone teasing but probing. James hesitated, then squeezed her hand. "Later," he said, his deep voice a promise. The jet leveled at 35,000 feet, the cabin lights dimming, a serene contrast to the chaos they'd survived. Vanessa's cell, Carl's bars, Eddie's silence. Pastor Daniel's blessing lingered in James's ears, a call to rise above. Outside the airport, a handful of hecklers lingered, their signs dwarfed by a sea of Phoenix Air supporters waving gold and black flags. Marissa's article hit newsstands, her words a clarion. From frame-up to flight, Carter's redefined justice. Rachel texted, "Feds raiding Lang's office. Memos found." The board's secrets, years of buried complaints, were unraveling, fuel for Phoenix Air's ascent. Tina paused by Sophie, offering a juice box. "You're a brave kid," she said, her voice thick, remembering Sophie's tears at O'Hare. Sophie beamed, sketching Tina into her plane, a tiny hero with a smile. James watched, his split lip curling faintly, pride swelling for his family, for Tina's redemption. The jet soared toward New York, a victory lap. But James knew the final reckoning waited. A concert, a letter, a chance to heal scars deeper than his own, setting the stage for a closing act of grace. The Phoenix Air jet touched down at New York's LaGuardia Airport under a twilight sky. its golden black wings glinting as passengers erupted in applause, a salute to the Carter's triumph. James Carter stepped off the plane, his tailored charcoal suit sharp, his split lip a faint scar, his dark eyes glowing with hard-won peace. Elena walked beside him, her gold blouse vibrant, her shoulder healed, her brown eyes radiant with quiet strength. Sophie skipped ahead, her bumblebee backpack bouncing, Buddy clutched tight, her sketchpad brimming with planes soaring free. "We did it, Daddy," she chirped, her curls catching the evening breeze. James knelt, his deep voice warm. "We sure did, sweetheart," he said, ruffling her hair, his broad frame a shield for the family that had risen from ashes. The terminal buzzed, reporters snapping photos, number Phoenix flies trending as Marissa Tate's article, "Carter's victory redraws the skies," spread like wildfire. Back in Atlanta, a sprawling park glowed under strings of lights, transformed for a charity concert James had organized to honor victims of bias, the stage a beacon of hope. Thousands gathered, their gold and black banners waving, Pastor Daniel Hayes opening with a prayer, "Let love lift us higher." James, Elena, and Sophie arrived, greeted by cheers, Rachel Cohen and Tina Brooks among the crowd, their faces alight with pride. Elena took the microphone, her voice steady. "This is for everyone who's fought to be seen," she said, her gold blouse catching the spotlight, her words a balm for scars old and new. Sophie stood beside her, clutching a sketch, her small presence mighty. James watched, his heart swelling, but a weight lingered. A letter, anonymous, slipped under his hotel door that morning. Victor Lang planned it all, years before Vanessa. It hinted at deeper rot, a choice to chase or let go. On a Chicago prison TV, Vanessa Reed watched the concert stream, her gray jumpsuit a shroud, her blonde hair limp, her pale green eyes dull in her cell. Life without parole had crushed her defiance. Carl's betrayal and Vic's confession sealing her fate. Eddie's bars and Horizon's collapse, stock at zero, board arrested, left her a ghost. Sophie's face filled the screen, and Vanessa's breath caught, a crack in her armor. The girl stepped forward, her voice clear. "I drew something for peace," she said, holding up a phoenix, wings wide. The crowd roared, but James sensed Elena's gaze, her brown eyes probing. He'd have to tell her about Lang's letter, about choosing healing over vengeance, a decision to shape their night. Atlanta Park pulsed with the concert's rhythm, music weaving through the crowd as stars emerged above, a canvas for the Carters' redemption. James stood with Elena, his charcoal suit creased from embracing supporters, his dark eyes soft as he watched Sophie on stage. She handed her phoenix sketch to Pastor Daniel, who held it high, its gold wings a symbol of grace. "This child shows us the way," he said, his voice booming, sparking cheers. Elena's gold blouse glowed, her hand finding James's, her brown eyes searching. "You're quiet," she whispered, her shoulder brushing his. He pulled the anonymous letter from his pocket, its words heavy. Lang orchestrated Vanessa's rise, buried her bias for profit. "Found this today," he murmured, his deep voice low. "Could drag them all down. Lang, the old board. But I'm done chasing ghosts." Elena nodded, her grip tightening, a shared choice to let vengeance fade for Sophie's sake. Sophie ran to them, Buddy swinging, her bumblebee backpack bright under the lights. "I sent a drawing," she said, eyes wide. James knelt, puzzled. "To who, sweetheart?" Tina Brooks approached, her navy uniform swapped for a dress, her round face flushed. "She mailed it to Vanessa," Tina said, handing James a photo of Sophie's sketch, a phoenix with a note. "You can fly again." Vanessa's prison cell flickered in James's mind, her pale green eyes haunted as she'd clutched that drawing on TV. Tears streaming, a crack of remorse no one expected. He pulled Sophie close, his voice thick. "You're bigger than me, kid." The crowd swayed to a gospel choir, Marissa filming, her lens catching Rachel smiling. Her lawsuits had bankrupted Horizon's remnants, billions won for justice. A surprise hit. Evelyn Harper, the first-class passenger who'd once stayed silent, announced a scholarship in Sophie's name, her voice breaking. "I failed you then. Not now. Under the starlit sky, James and Elena danced slowly, Sophie twirling nearby, her laughter a bell. Pastor Daniel joined them, his gray suit rumpled, his words warm. "You've turned pain to light." James looked at Elena, her gold blouse a beacon, and whispered, "For us, for everyone." The letter's weight lifted, Lang's shadow irrelevant against Sophie's gift, a child's forgiveness thawing a frozen heart. Vanessa in her cell pinned the sketch to her wall, a faint hope stirring, her first step toward redemption. Phoenix Air soared, its stock gold, its jets a fleet of fairness. The Carters stood unbroken, their scars a map of battles won, the park's glow a promise kept, a world where love outflew hate, leaving a melody of peace to linger long after the music faded.